The Addams Family, 1964, 15 Weird Facts. You didn't know. It's been more than 60 years since The Addams Family first hit the air, but hardly anyone has heard about what was really going on behind that crooked mansion, creaking through every episode. The show premiered on ABC in 1964 and ran for 2 seasons, introducing audiences to Gomez and Morticia Addams, played by John Astin and Carolyn Jones, a couple hopelessly in love who found practically anything that would terrify a normal human being to be romantic. Alongside them were their kids, Wednesday, played by Lisa Loring, and Pugsley, played by Ken Weatherwax. Rounding out the cast were towering Butler Lurch, played by Ted Cassidy, and Uncle Fester, played by Jackie Coogan. What audiences saw on screen was already strange enough, but what was happening behind the cameras was, somehow, even stranger. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about the Addams Family that you probably never knew. And stick around for number 1, because turning into Morticia was a 2-hour ritual every single morning, and the dress was the worst part of it. But before we head into the mansion, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps YouTube show this video to more classic TV fans like you. Alright, let's get into it. Number 15. The show's creator lived like one of his own cartoons. Before there was a TV show, there was just Charles Addams, a cartoonist quietly terrifying readers of The New Yorker one panel at a time since 1938. And here's the part nobody expects. Addams didn't just draw a macabre family, he basically lived like one. His house on Long Island was nicknamed The Swamp, and it was decorated exactly the way you'd imagine if a horror cartoonist got an unlimited budget and 0 adult supervision. A suit of medieval armor stood in one room. An axe and a set of crossbows hung on the walls next to actual human skulls. He picked up a genuine antique embalming table at an estate sale and, because he apparently found nothing strange about this, used it as his coffee table. As a kid growing up in Westfield, New Jersey, Addams used to sneak into a local cemetery just to sit there and think, and he was once caught by police breaking into an abandoned Victorian house he found interesting. That same house is widely believed to be part of the inspiration for the Addams Family mansion, and here's the twist that makes the whole thing even better. Addams' actual romantic life read like one of his own cartoons come to life. All 3 of his wives bore a striking resemblance to Morticia, dark hair and all, and his first wife would sometimes dress up as the character for fun. When he married his 3rd and final wife in 1980, the ceremony didn't happen in a church. It happened in a pet cemetery on her property in Long Island, with the bride dressed head to toe in black. Before any of that, during World War II, Addams served in the U.S. Army Signal Corps, where his actual job was drawing animated training films for soldiers. A very serious, very official use of a very unserious skill set. On top of all that, his house also contained a papier-mâché anatomical figure originally built for schools, the kind where you could pull out the removable organs one by one, sitting there like just another piece of living room decor. Guests who came to interview him for magazine profiles often left more unsettled than when they arrived, describing an evening that felt less like a visit and more like accidentally wandering into one of his own drawings. The man who invented a family that found the ordinary world horrifying spent his entire life quietly proving that he was every bit as unusual as the people he drew. Number 14. The Addams Family helped rewrite the rules of Hollywood forever, before the bald head, before the bowler hat, before Uncle Fester started lighting bulbs with his mouth on primetime television. Jackie Coogan had already been one of the biggest child stars Hollywood had ever produced. After co-starring with Charlie Chaplin in The Kid in 1921, Coogan became one of the first true child superstars in history, earning millions at a time when that kind of money changed everything around it. And then he grew up. He took control of his own finances and discovered there was practically nothing left. His mother and stepfather had spent almost all of it: furs, jewelry, luxury items. And the part that turned a personal disaster into a national scandal is that all of it was completely legal. Child actors didn't own their own earnings, their parents did. Every dollar Coogan had made as a kid legally belonged to somebody else. So in 1938, he sued his mother and stepfather. But after legal fees, he only managed to recover $126,000 out of the $250,000 that remained of his earnings, out of a total estimated at $4 million. The rest had simply vanished. The public outrage that followed gave Hollywood an uncomfortable lesson about how it treated the youngest people it profited from. California responded in 1939 with what became known as the Coogan Law, though the version with real teeth didn't arrive until years later, after loopholes kept getting closed. Today, a child actor's employer is legally required to set aside 15% of their earnings into a protected trust, a Coogan account, accessible only to the young performer once they reach adulthood. It's a rule that traces its entire existence back to one very specific childhood star, discovering in real time that stardom and financial security were not automatically the same thing. The man who played Uncle Fester rewrote the rules of an entire industry without ever meaning to. Number 13. Gomez almost ended up being Lurch. John Astin didn't walk into the Addams Family audition to play Gomez. He walked in to try out for Lurch, the slow, silent, deeply unbothered butler who communicated mostly through posture and a mild disapproval of existence. Now, sit with that for a second. John Astin, a man who acts like someone floored the gas pedal and then removed the brakes entirely, auditioning for a character whose entire personality was standing still and saying nothing. Producers noticed the mismatch almost immediately. So instead of sending him home, creator and producer David Levy made the smarter call. Wrong role, right actor. They gave him Gomez instead. The character wasn't fully defined yet, which turned out to be the best possible situation. Levy gave Astin total creative freedom, and he built the whole thing from scratch. That manic energy, the rapid-fire delivery, the almost explosive devotion to Morticia. None of that was written beforehand. Astin brought all of it himself. He later said Gomez was, in his own words, the clearest extension of my personality of any role he ever played. The contrast that resulted was exactly what the show needed. Gomez was loud, fast, and operated at a frequency slightly dangerous to nearby furniture. Lurch was slow, silent, and moved like he had nowhere to be and no particular feelings about it. Put the two performances side by side, and it's hard to imagine either actor successfully playing the other's part, which makes it all the stranger that Astin originally walked in, convinced he was right for the quiet one. Number 12. Lurch didn't have any lines until he decided otherwise. When Ted Cassidy was cast as Lurch, the character had exactly one job: stand there, be enormous, and say absolutely nothing. Lurch was written as a silent presence, a background fixture who showed up when summoned and disappeared back into the shadows without uttering a syllable. That lasted until the pilot episode. The family rang the gong, Lurch appeared, and Cassidy made a split-second decision to open his mouth. What came out was two words.
You rang.
You rang? But those two words came out in a voice that sounded like it had been born somewhere deep underground and taken its time reaching the surface. The whole room lost it. The crew, the producers, everyone. It was immediately obvious that keeping that voice silent for an entire series would have been a genuine waste. Writers rewrote the character on the spot. Lurch went from mute prop to one of the show's most distinctive presences, dropping short lines here and there for the rest of the series, and even briefly launched a music career. In 1965, Cassidy recorded a song called The Lurch and performed the accompanying dance on the musical show Shindig, kicking off a small dance craze. Two completely improvised words, and Lurch was never wallpaper again. Number 11. The show existed because of a race against a rival network. In 1964, two different television networks decided, completely independently of one another, that America needed a sitcom about a spooky family living among normal people, and neither one found out about the other's project until it was already too late to do anything sensible about it. ABC had the Addams Family in development. CBS had the Munsters. Same basic concept, two different networks, and suddenly everybody was moving faster than originally planned. ABC rushed to get its version out first, and barely pulled it off. The Addams Family premiered on September 18, 1964. The Munsters followed just 6 days later. Both shows found an audience, both became recognizable almost instantly, but the surface-level similarities hid a pretty fundamental difference in execution. The Munsters were classic movie monsters trying to pass as regular Americans and completely failing at it. The Addams Family were wealthy eccentrics who were absolutely comfortable with themselves and genuinely had no idea anyone might find them strange. One show was about trying to fit in, and the other was about a family too confident in itself to notice it didn't. In the ratings battle, the Munsters pulled slightly ahead, not by much, but consistently enough to matter. Then Batman premiered in January 1966, scheduled directly opposite the Munsters on Thursday nights. And the Monster Family's ratings on CBS collapsed almost immediately. The Addams Family, airing on a different night, was already struggling on its own, and the networks had seen enough. Both spooky family shows were gone within months of each other. The genre was over. John Astin himself has pointed to this same moment as part of why his own show ended too. He's said the network ultimately decided the Munsters and the Addams Family were basically the same kind of show, and once Batman knocked one of them out, both got quietly let go. There's also a technical reason lurking underneath all of this. Both shows were shot entirely in black and white, and by the 1966-67 season, every network was required to air a full-color primetime lineup. Retooling sets, wardrobe, and makeup for color would have cost real money, and with ratings that were decent but not spectacular, neither network seemed interested in footing that bill. Two shows that had raced each other into existence over a matter of days ended up getting shown the door within roughly the same stretch of months, for reasons that had less to do with either family and more to do with a technology upgrade neither one was built for. Number 10. The real mansion became a parking lot. That crooked mansion with the tower from the opening credits, the one that looked specifically designed to scare off visitors, wasn't quite what you'd expect. It was a real Victorian house, located at 21 Chester Place in Los Angeles. The pilot episode actually used it. Real location, real facade, no production tricks. The house did all the creepy work by itself, which made sense since it had been looking unsettling long before any film crew ever showed up. After that first episode, production moved elsewhere. Shooting on a real location is expensive and unpredictable, so the art department took over with a matte painting, a heavily reworked image that added a third floor, a Gothic tower, and somehow produced something that looked like it was actively repelling sunlight. Most viewers never noticed the switch. The porch, if you looked closely, told a completely different story, but nobody was looking that closely. And then real life delivered its own plot twist. The original mansion was demolished in the late 1960s to make room for a school-running track and a parking lot. The only thing left on that property today is a decorative 6-globe lamppost. The most famous house on 1960s television ended its story in the least glamorous way possible. Underneath asphalt. Number 9, the spookiest house on TV was actually pink. The Addams Mansion looked plunged in shadow and aged cobwebs, but in reality, it was pink. Black and white television had one specific problem. Dark colors collapsed into each other on camera. Black swallowed detail, brown turned into a shapeless visual soup. So, the art department built a haunted house using pink walls, red tones, and turquoise. A color palette Morticia herself probably would have set on fire with her own hands. But on screen, all of that read as a rich, shadowy, perfectly creepy combination. The cast was part of the illusion too. Makeup artists used green, purple, and brown tones to keep faces from washing out under studio lights. Morticia looked effortlessly pale and elegant on your television, while wearing makeup that, in person, would probably stop any conversation cold. And the mansion wasn't even built from scratch. Parts of the set were reused directly from the 1964 film The Unsinkable Molly Brown. MGM literally raided its own warehouse for anything that looked remotely sinister. Old props, recycled furniture, random taxidermy. If it had the right vibe, it made the cut. The spookiest house on 1960s television was built entirely on the assumption that nobody would notice. And for decades, that assumption held up perfectly. It wasn't until behind-the-scenes photos and color footage from related productions started circulating that audiences began learning the most gothic house on classic TV had, in real life, been as cheerful as a candy shop window. For a show entirely built around the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it's a fittingly ironic detail that the mansion itself only looked haunted because a camera was lying about it the whole time. Number 8. The characters didn't have names until the last possible moment. Gomez, Morticia, Wednesday, Pugsley, some of the most recognizable names in television history, and none of them existed until somebody had to sit down and invent them. Charles Addams spent decades drawing this family for The New Yorker without giving any of them a name. They were just strange, gothic, vaguely unsettling figures. And, of course, completely anonymous. Single-panel cartoons didn't need introductions, so nobody got one. But that changed in stages. Morticia and Wednesday were named first, for a licensed doll collection released in 1962. Morticia came straight from mortician, obviously. Subtlety was never part of the assignment. Wednesday was pulled from the nursery rhyme that says Wednesday's child is full of woe, which basically explains the entire character in one line. Gomez and Pugsley had to wait until the show itself was in development 2 years later. For Gomez, Charles Addams had a clear preference: repelli, as in repellent. The final call landed with John Astin, who looked at both options and made the right choice. Pugsley, meanwhile, was originally going to be named Pubert, but ABC's censors killed that idea immediately. Even the last name was an accident. Addams was simply the creator's signature on the original cartoons. It became the family surname only because the show needed a title. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button. It tells YouTube there are still people out there who think a family with a pet lion and a hand living in a box counts as comfort television. And subscribe if you haven't already. And while you're here, drop a comment with your favorite Addams Family character. Alright, back to the countdown. Number 7. One actor secretly played 2 characters and messed with the audience without anyone noticing. Thing was already one of the strangest creative decisions on 1960s television. A disembodied hand living in boxes and hidden compartments in the walls, treated by the entire Addams family as a perfectly reasonable household arrangement. And then, Ted Cassidy decided to make it even weirder. Thing started the series being right-handed. Then, quietly and without any explanation, Cassidy started switching. Right hand, left hand, back to right. Just to see if anyone in the audience was paying close enough attention to notice. Most people didn't. The few who did apparently just accepted it, which says a lot about the kind of show this was. The logistics of playing Thing were already absurd on their own. Cassidy stood nearly 6'9", which meant every appearance required him to lie on his back underneath the set, on a wheeled platform, reaching his arm through hidden compartments in the furniture. And while he was down there, he apparently figured he might as well run a quiet little experiment on the audience. When scenes required Lurch and Thing to appear on screen at the same time, Cassidy obviously couldn't be in 2 places at once, so a stand-in played the hand. Thing was mysterious by design, and it turns out also inconsistent by design. Decades later, fans poring over old episodes frame by frame would rediscover this exact detail and treat it like a freshly uncovered conspiracy, which is more or less exactly the reaction Cassidy seems to have been hoping for the whole time. Number 6. The family's pet needed its own safety protocol. The Addams family's pet lion, named Kitty Cat, was a fully retired circus lion, completely real, brought onto a network sitcom set as if that were a perfectly normal production decision. A trainer stayed on set at all times, which sounds reassuring right up until you remember. The reason you need a full-time trainer on a family comedy set is, oh right, because there's a lion on the family comedy set. Child actors Lisa Loring and Ken Weatherwax, meaning Wednesday and Pugsley, were completely banned from the set whenever the lion was present. The rule was simple: not today, kids. And here's the part that makes it even better. Most of what audiences actually saw on screen was reused archival footage. The same shots of the lion coming down the stairs or growling at the camera repeated episode after episode. The cast member requiring the most special handling also had, in practice, the smallest workload. Kitty Cat was, in every sense, a perfectly natural resident of the Addams household. Number 5. Cousin It's costume was one lit cigarette away from disaster. Cousin It was a walking pile of hair, a bowler hat, and a pair of sunglasses, and somehow became one of the show's most memorable characters. What audiences didn't know is that the original costume was made of real human hair, heavy and completely flammable. It was worn by actor Felix Silla, who stood just under 4 feet tall on a set where, Since it was the 1960s, practically everybody smoked between takes. According to Scylla's own interviews, the crew would drop cigarette butts on the floor and just stamp them out right there. Producers looked at the situation, looked at the hair costume, and made the call. They needed to switch to synthetic, fire-retardant material before something irreversible happened in front of the cameras. The new costume solved the flammability problem and kept everything else just as uncomfortable. It was still heavy, still suffocatingly hot, and Scylla spent every scene navigating the set almost completely blind, buried under layers of synthetic hair, hoping the next thing in his path was his floor mark and not a wall. His only instructions were basically just to walk across the set. Cousin It's voice was actually added in post-production by a sound engineer named Tony Magro, so Scylla wasn't even responsible for that part. On screen, Cousin It delivered total gibberish with complete confidence and stole scenes without a visible face. And here's the bonus. Years later, that same actor, Felix Scylla, would go on to play an Ewok in 1983's Return of the Jedi. The pile of hair from the Addams mansion and the furry adventure on Endor share the same man underneath the costume, which means one very small, very patient actor is quietly responsible for two of the most recognizable silhouettes in the entire history of American pop culture, and almost nobody ever saw his actual face in either role. Number 4. The New Yorker banned the family. It helped create after the Addams Family became a hit. The New Yorker, which had been publishing Charles Addams's cartoons since the 1930s, looked at what was now airing on ABC and made a decision. They wanted nothing to do with it. Editor William Shawn banned any new publication of Addams Family content in the magazine's pages. The reason wasn't just popularity, it was class. Shawn saw a network sitcom as lowbrow art, and the New Yorker wanted no association with characters anybody could now watch on television. Of course not. The same magazine that had quietly supported this strange family for decades drew a very firm line at exactly the moment the family got its own opening theme song. The ban lasted 23 years, from 1964 to 1987. Addams kept publishing in the New Yorker the entire time. Same artist, same sensibility, same pages, just without those characters. Even so, he found ways around the rule. He slipped the family quietly into the background of other cartoons. A 1979 Subway cartoon shows Uncle Fester and Grandmama riding the train if you know where to look. Over time, Addams grew bitter about the whole thing and privately described the magazine as having disowned his family. The ban was finally lifted in 1987 when Shawn retired. The family returned to the pages that had launched them into the world, and Charles Addams died the following year. The Addams Family spent its entire existence being too weird for normal people and too popular for sophisticated ones. They never quite fit in anywhere, which honestly is pretty on brand for them. Number 3, Uncle Fester built his own character after getting rejected. Jackie Coogan's first audition for Uncle Fester didn't go well. Producers looked at him and decided he wasn't strange enough for the part, which, given the competition, was a genuinely discouraging thing to hear. Coogan went home and took matters into his own hands. He shaved his head. He shaved his eyebrows. He built the character's entire look himself, from scratch, working directly off Charles Addams's original cartoons with no help from the wardrobe department. The other actors who'd auditioned had shown up in bald caps and waxed-over eyebrows, a safe, reversible version of commitment to the role. Coogan just did it for real. He then sat in front of a mirror to do his own makeup, and his wife, watching the whole transformation, started crying. Then he went back to the audition. He walked in completely transformed, radiating the specific energy of someone who hadn't had a normal day since the Eisenhower administration. Producers had no notes left to give. There was nothing left to say. The character was standing right in front of them. The man they'd told wasn't strange enough had gone off and single-handedly created the character's entire visual identity. He came back on his own terms, and he walked out with the part. It's the kind of story that sounds like a Hollywood legend polished up over the decades, except the wardrobe department genuinely never had to design a single piece of it. Coogan had already done their job for them before he ever set foot back in the room. Number 2. The Wednesday You Know didn't exist until 1991. Wednesday Addams, deadpan, morbid, and possessed of a quiet certainty that the world was disappointing and she'd already accepted it. Well, that version of Wednesday is from 1991. The original was completely different. On the 1964 series, Lisa Loring played Wednesday as a genuinely sweet, warm-hearted little girl. She smiled, she danced. She taught lurch dance moves in style. She had a pet spider named Homer, and in the very first episode, cheerfully helped a school truant officer track down her own father. Outside of her braids, her black dress, and her taste for spiders and headless dolls, she was practically interchangeable with any other kid on television that year. The Addams Family themselves described her as a solemn child, but solemn was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. She was, by any reasonable measure, a perfectly pleasant 6-year-old who just happened to live in a very strange house and had no particular feelings about it. Then came the 1991 film with Christina Ricci, and Wednesday Addams became someone else entirely, cold, calculating, deadpan, in a way that suggested she'd already run through multiple scenarios and found them all equally disappointing. That version of the character was so convincing that every Wednesday since has been built from Ricci's mold, including Jenna Ortega's performance in the Netflix series. Ortega has said publicly that she specifically studied Loring's performance as part of her inspiration, which is a genuinely nice touch considering how far the character traveled from where Loring left it. The Wednesday the world thinks is the original is actually the third act of a character who spent her first years being surprisingly cheerful about, well, everything. Number 1, Morticia's effortless glide had a very uncomfortable explanation. Carolyn Jones made Morticia look completely natural, gliding through every scene without any hurry, as if she'd arrived in the world exactly like that. But the reality was considerably less effortless. Every morning, before cameras started rolling, Jones started with the wig. That signature jet black hair was a full hairpiece, styled from scratch every single day. Then came the makeup. That same strange color palette we mentioned earlier, which looked like abstract art in person and gothic perfection on your television. That alone ate up a good chunk of the morning. And then came the dress, and that's where the real commitment kicked in. According to costume designer Nolan Miller, that dress was the hardest thing he ever designed in his entire career. A hobble dress, form-fitting from top to bottom, and specifically built to restrict movement. Once Jones was in it, the wardrobe department had, in effect, made every decision about how she'd move for her. Small, controlled steps, not because it looked elegant, but because the dress didn't leave her any other option. The costume team eventually sewed Velcro into the back, just so she could move it all between takes. And at the end of every shooting day, taking the whole thing off took nearly 2 hours total, about 20 full minutes of which were spent just peeling the dress off. That smooth, almost supernatural glide Morticia had entering any room wasn't an acting choice. It was the wardrobe department's way of letting her know, without saying a word, that the matter was no longer up for discussion. Jones reportedly kept a good sense of humor about the whole ordeal, but crew members who worked those long shooting days remembered it less as a costume fitting and more as a daily negotiation between one actress and one extremely uncooperative piece of fabric. Bonus fact 1. Another very recognizable name also passed through the Addams mansion. Before we wrap up, it's worth mentioning someone you probably didn't expect to find in this cast. Morticia's own mother, Granny Frump, appeared in a handful of episodes played by Margaret Hamilton, the same actress immortalized as the Wicked Witch of the West in 1939's The Wizard of Oz, meaning two absolute icons of classic Hollywood film and television shared the same haunted set, even if only briefly. And there's one more curious name buried in the credits. The pilot episode, the same one that used the real mansion on Chester Place, was directed by Arthur Hiller, a director who years later would be nominated for an Oscar for directing Love Story, 1970, and would take home the Golden Globe for that same film. Before becoming a respected name in Hollywood, he literally helped open the front door on one of the most beloved and strangest families in television. Bonus fact 2. The family's most famous actor became a real-life dad, and it changed movie history. Here's a connection almost nobody makes. The man who played Gomez Addams became the adoptive father of one of America's most beloved actors. Years after the show ended, John Astin married actress Patty Duke in 1972 and adopted her young son, Sean, raising him from early childhood as his own. Sean Astin has said publicly that genetics were never the point. John was, and remained, his dad, in every way that mattered. And here's the part that quietly changed pop culture forever. In the mid-1980s, a teenage John Astin was auditioning for a new Steven Spielberg-produced adventure movie about a group of kids chasing pirate treasure. He was staying at his father's place while working on the audition, and John gave him one piece of advice that stuck. Stop acting your idea of what this character is supposed to be. It's actually you. Sean took that advice into the room. The movie was The Goonies, and the role was Mikey Walsh. John Astin went on to become one of the most recognizable faces in American film, from Rudy to Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings to Stranger Things. The man behind Gomez Addams' manic energy didn't just play a great TV dad. He helped raise a real one and gave him the exact note that helped launch his career. It's the kind of connection that never shows up in trivia nights about the original 1964 series, mostly because it happened years after the cameras stopped rolling, but it means the Addams Mansion is, in its own roundabout way, quietly wired into the origin story of some of the most beloved adventure films of the following decades. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird and wild facts about the Addams Family, plus a couple of bonus surprises that earned their spot on the list. Drop a comment with the fact that surprised you the most. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time.